Well, let's move toward cognition and motor learning, Kitty, to start with for you, as we talked about earlier this week. And, you know, I personally trace my awareness to the importance of this topics, or both of those topics, to a couple full-day workshops I took with you almost 15 years ago. You came to Indiana University when I was there for a week-long workshop with Paul Kiesgen. That's, I believe, when I first met you. And thanks to, of course, your work, and then Lynn Helding and Lynn Maxfield and others, many of these concepts that you were talking about that long ago and longer have changed voice teachers' approaches to teaching singing. I mean, they really have transformed things for a lot of us. But where are we now? Have we come far enough with regards to motor?
Have we come far enough in terms of dissemination and application in the studio?
Correct.
Based on some data, I think it was a dissertation study looking at the application or non-application of some of the very, very basic principles of motor learning in the studio. And he came up with some pretty disturbing data. And those data showed that, you know, we voice people, we're all pretty talkative. And so we talk a lot during voice lessons. And we don't leave the learner the space to learn. And as Lynn has also cited, our job is not so much to teach as it is to create an environment in which the student learns, because the student is the actual learner. And I know I've told anecdotes many times of, you know, I had many, many different voice teachers, some of them very, very famous. And I would always do really, really well in my lessons. And then I would walk out of there and I couldn't replicate, and I hurt myself attempting to replicate. But when I was in lessons, my voice was being driven by their brain. And when I left, by their feedback and constant correction and no, not that, and almost conducting, you know, during even scales. And I would walk out of there without their brain, and I wouldn't be able to, I wasn't able to replicate. And got myself into a whole bunch of different kinds of voice problems attempting to replicate without their brains, until I had the voice teacher Mark Madsen, who unfortunately now is also deceased, and he hardly said a word. And I was miffed in the beginning. I knew he had produced a lot of good singers, and that wasn't because he attracted a lot of good singers necessarily, or only good singers necessarily. I had seen them when they went into a studio, and then I saw them a couple of years later when I was, you know, adjudicating for Nats juries and what have you, and they were much, much better, and their voices all sounded very different. So he wasn't trying to stuff them into a certain box that he thought was aesthetically preferable. He let them explore and expand their own voices, but what they all had in common was freedom and power and subtlety. And he kept his mouth shut. Maybe every 10 minutes he said something. And in the beginning, and as opposed to all the other teachers that I had, in the beginning I had really awful lessons. I stuck with him because I thought there's something here. I've seen too much good come out of this studio. And I was already a teacher of singing myself in his department, as a matter of fact, at UMSL in St. Louis. And it's because he let me belly flop. He let me sweat. He let me work. And then he would keep me from going off the cliff. You know, it's not that he didn't say or do anything, but his feedback was very sparse. So I think we have a long way to go in terms of application. When I first started giving seminars and stuff like that on motor learning, I was presenting the party line, so, sort of the simple version of things, simple but true version of things. And I think in the past 20 years, we have come a long way, adding a lot of subtlety to what we have known before. And I am hoping to give a course that adds to the biomechanics and the biology of what I have been teaching, and also especially some increased subtlety to motor learning. But having said as much, if we're still in the dark in terms of application of the simple stuff, maybe we shouldn't complicate things.
And you think that talking too much is the biggest disruption to their learning? Is that from
talking too much, because we want to show that we know what we're doing, and we want to get an immediate result, and they are very impressed by the immediate result. Yes. Talking too much, giving too much feedback, and giving feedback too soon. So there's one study that looked at feedback for a different kind of a task, but nonetheless feedback. Feedback that was provided immediately following utterance completion, so 0 milliseconds, compared to 3 to 4 seconds. And they found that learning at retention, at later retention tests, was greater with a 3 or 4 second delay. Now that's a long time. So I go, me. Good, right? So we all need, and I continue myself to try to get into that groove of a very heavy silence.
I think it's tricky too, because as independent voice teachers in particular, they're paying us a lot of money, and we have to keep earning that week after week, right? We're constantly needing to feel valuable, and so to be quiet for 10 minutes and let them figure it out is challenging, right? For that, you want to make sure that they feel like they're getting value for money. So there's a narrative that needs to be altered, I think.
Oh, exactly. And when I first went to study with Mark, I remember my first lesson and I went, me, and I look at him, me, me, nothing. And that's exactly what I was thinking, is I'm paying $40 here. We're talking 1980, okay? Still nothing. So after about 5 minutes, I thought, well, somebody's got to do something here. It better be me, if he's not going to. And here's another really, really important point, that in general, it has been found that the things that we do in a studio or in a training session that boosts immediate performance during the session actually harms long-term learning. At some level, we have to be able to tolerate not so good lessons in order for them to progress. Well, and also when we talk too much, we are masking the student's own feedback and feed forward. There's some really nice data showing that visual information persists in what's called the first memory store. It's not even a memory store, it's called iconic storage. So it is, for example, if you go like this in front of your face. Now here on Zoom, you can see the trail on Zoom. But if you're not looking at Zoom and you just go like that, there is a trail. Okay, there's a visual trail. And that persists for about a maximum of 250 milliseconds, after which time it's gone. In the auditory modality, the trail is actually 2 to 4 seconds. So when we jump in, we are masking that raw material that the student then might put into short-term memory and ultimately into long. We're totally masking it. If a person's going for the high note and we're giving them all kinds of instructions, we are masking what's sometimes called the efferent copy. The efferent copy is a copy of the perceptual outcome that you want, and you can actually experience it, when you're going for the high note. Or while I'm playing a certain phrase, I hear that next phrase. This phrase is gone. I hear it, yeah. So,
one of the things I love about our field is voice teachers we always are so thirsty for more knowledge, right? I mean, it's just an extraordinary group of people that go into this field. And one of the things we've learned from motor learning is that learning has to be messy. It might have to be uncomfortable, not physically, but uncomfortable. So maybe this whole aspect of singing teachers still are talking too much, we might have to go through another layer of it being uncomfortable for us as teachers as we learn. So we're asking it to be uncomfortable for the students